Yeah, so it's really good to be back here. And we kind of, as Andres said, we kind of switched roles. Last year I was talking about Hans Hermann Hoppe's theory of argumentation ethics, and Janne took a more personal topic last year. And this time we are switching roles, and I'm taking more the personal topic after Janne talked about logic and semantics and hardcore topics like that. And yeah, so I peeked into my box of truth and found a person in there. Help. I wonder how many of you are utterly confused by this title, what I'm going to talk about. That's good. What I really like about the title is that it leaves a lot of room for imagination, right? At least for me, there's immediately an image coming up. For me, it's like there's this wooden box somewhere, and I open it, and then there is this happy person standing in there saying, like, hello, like, and I'm just closing the box very quickly. There's no person supposed to be in there. And yeah, actually, this title is the product of a sunny afternoon on Janne's terrace. We wanted to come up with talk titles, and maybe our minds went off a bit too far into the direction of metaphors and images, but there are quite some parts in this title already that will tell you something about my topic once I give you a little bit of explanation. So the I in the beginning, I peeked into this box, stands for that I'm going to tell a personal story of mine. The part with the box of truth is a symbol for a topic in the area of epistemology. So I want to talk about what do I know and where do I know it from? How do I acquire knowledge? And then, of course, there's this mysterious person which is sitting in this box. And in my case, in my personal story I'm going to tell, this is about Freedomain Radio, or Stefan Molyneux in particular, whose works Janne has cited in the morning already. But it doesn't really matter if you know him or not. It's interchangeable with other people as well. And then in the end it says help. And so I want to, of course, give you my suggestion how to approach this problem I'm still going to lay out in the next half an hour or so. And I also am curious how you handle this, and maybe we can have a good discussion about that. Yeah, so to get into this, I will start with a personal backstory. And I have to travel back a bit in time, like around 10 years. Back then, I had a company together with two Dutch friends of mine. And I was in Holland. I was visiting them we had some business things to do. And I was staying with one of them, Ruben. And then on the day when I had to leave again, he brought me to the train. And before we went to the train station, he gave me a little book. And he said, I think you will really like this book. You should read this. And he knew pretty well how my mind works, I think. And he had the right idea that I will pick up on this. And so the book he gave me was this little book from Murray Rothbard, What Government Has Done to Our Money. I had never heard anything about this before. It was my first contact with this whole topic, basically. Pretty much with the whole topic of economics, but also the Austrian School of Economics in particular. So he gave me the book. He took me to the train station, and I read the book in the train still, and he was right. I really liked it. It kind of fit well together with also the way how Rothbard lays out his arguments. It really triggered some logical part in my brain that really liked this. And then later on, he told me that when he came back from the station back home, he was on the phone with his brother, and he told his brother that he gave me this book, and then that he probably had just destroyed my marriage by setting me off in this direction of Austrian economics and anarchy, voluntarism. And so I'm happy to report that he didn't succeed. My marriage is still well and stronger. Yeah, but that was a major turning point for me. So I learned about Austrian economics. I got really into that. I got some of the some more bigger and more heavy books, and from Ludwig von Mises. I started reading this, and later from Rothbard, and then of course Hans Hermann Hoppe, which I back then also just enjoyed listening to some speeches just for the fun of it because of his funny English accent. And getting to know this Austrian School of Economics changed my perspective on the world pretty dramatically. It changed, or to put it differently, it changed how I processed or how I looked onto all this information coming towards me, or which I was seeking out in the world. Of course, especially political stuff, right? Political information, all this normal daily news, the stuff that you have in your favorites bar, you just click through every time, you know, like these kind of news. It changed my perception of this dramatically. I suddenly had the feeling that I had a huge, powerful tool at my hands to cut through all this crap and somehow to understand why there is this sea of information that doesn't make any sense, and there's no way to somehow to resolve this, and it's just this endless, it goes on for all time that people have these weird debates with each other about whom you vote for. And so it felt like a very powerful tool, and it felt very it felt like fog had been lifted somehow, and I could see more clearly onto the world. So this was really not just an intellectual transition for me, but it was also an emotional transition, because I think, at least that's the way I experience it, that the things or the way I look into the world, what I think I know about the world, shapes a lot my experience in the world. It shapes how I feel in the world. For example, if you could make up an obvious example, right, with somebody who is seeing injustice, however you define that, everywhere, it will dramatically impact your emotional experience of this world. And so in this way, it wasn't just an intellectual adventure, but it changed really the way I felt in the world. And so that is already quite a long time ago for my standard for my lifespan currently. So a bit later, around 3 years ago, I'd say, another major transition started happening for me. And this one, and I think for me it had equal impact on how I look into the world, and especially how I not just deal with political information, because Austrian economics helped me really to cut through a lot of political stuff, but this time it's more about knowledge in the world in general. And this transition for me was really about reclaiming and embracing myself as the ultimate and only authority when it comes to what I know. And that still might sound a bit abstract, but I will expand on that. And the term I'm going to use, or I want to use for that, is epistemic anarchy, to draw the analogy to the more common understanding of anarchy in general. So where anarchy is commonly understood as the rejection of rulers, or the rejection of the legitimacy of rulers, I would say epistemic anarchy is the rejection of any kind of authority over my knowledge of the world. And so epistemic means in this context anarchy related to knowledge, anarchy related to acquiring knowledge. And let me just make sure that I don't forget anything important on the way. Yeah, so I felt since a long time that I really got this, that I was very confident in the fact that I was self-sufficient when it comes to acquiring knowledge, and that I was critically thinking, examining everything, and really forming my own judgment. And I found out that I was wrong about that. And I want to tell you the story about this process. First, the story how I came to the realization that I was wrong about that I was actually giving quite a lot of authority away from myself. And then I want to make a suggestion that I also tried for myself, how to deal with this problem of handling information in the world in a better way. So to start this story of how I noticed that there was something wrong there, I will start with how I got to know or how I got acquainted with the works of Stefan Molyneux and Freedomain Radio. And since in the morning when Janne asked the same question, much less people were in the room, so I'd like to ask again, how many of you know him or know a little bit about his work of Stefan Molyneux? Okay, yeah, it's a lot of you. Okay, but it's really just, I'm using him because he was kind of a catalyst for me in this process, but you could put anybody else in to whom you could assign some kind of authority, any kind of author, public figure, whatever it is. So it was around 2010 that I first stumbled across, or at least like consciously stumbled across some of his works. And I was already a voluntarist back then, so we had immediate agreement on this philosophical part. And so I started listening to more materials from him, and based on this common ground of this philosophical agreement of voluntarism, I was really intrigued by the personal topics he was talking about. So the value of self-knowledge, the value of therapy, building fulfilling relationships, peaceful parenting, all these topics that were very much at the core of his work. And I was really intrigued by that. And it was in 2010, I think, or 11. I remember we were on holiday with the camper, and we were sitting at some beautiful lakeside in the evening. And I was reading On Truth. That's a book by him. It's the first book I read from him. And I remember that was really, I was impressed by that somehow. I had never applied this kind of thinking, this kind of logic to these personal hierarchical parent-child relationships. And so this was really, I remember that I was really, that it was at least a big piece in the puzzle of a transformation that was going on. And so Steph just managed to communicate this value of introspection and examining your own feelings and stuff like that. He managed to successfully communicate this to a degree that I really got set off on this journey in this direction. And I went to therapy for the first time, and I started to examine more my inner life and my relationships and everything around that. And so we already had two common factors here in play. We had the voluntarist, the philosophical anarchist part that I really agreed with him, and then he was a big inspiration for me in my personal life. It really made a big difference for me. And through this, he became sort of a male role model for me also. So it was very. At first, I didn't really like watching him in these videos because I was not used to seeing somebody that confident, speaking about all kinds of topics that confident, expressing emotions that authentically, at least that's how I perceived it. And so there was quite a broad basis established there. My trust was growing a lot in him, in everything he did, basically, in all the information he put out. But it wasn't just this part. It was also that I realized that the quality of arguments, or arguments at all, right? So just arguments for positions, that he did this in a way that I wasn't used to from other kind of media or other news outlets. So my trust really was pretty high in there, and he had a big impact on my personal life. And so I enjoyed lots of his works for a few years. And the personal conversations really still had a special place for me somehow, but also I really enjoyed he put out presentations about all kinds of topics I might never have stumbled upon, all kinds of weird topics. And I got to know those topics through him, through a very unusual, off-mainstream position mostly. And I like that somehow. And yeah, so there was a big trust relationship had been built up there somehow. And I will come back to this word trust a bit later, but I just say it again also for me to just make a mental bookmark that I don't forget to come back to that. And then I want to tell you, so this is basically like the groundwork that has been laid for me to have a lot of trust and to take a lot of what he said just at face value, basically. And now I want to tell you two examples where I noticed that something with my way of processing this information, with him as an example now, but it could be something else, that there was a problem there. And of course, when I tell you these two examples, in reality it was a much more diffuse process. It was much less tangible. It was not linked that clearly to two events or something. It's like with therapy in movies or something. It's always this big event, and then everybody cries, and then it's good. So it might sound a bit like that, but in reality, of course, it's a way more gradual and diffuse process. And so the first event there was, I don't even remember exactly how long ago this is, but at some point he put out a presentation that was called "The Truth About Net Neutrality." Not the most exciting topic for many people probably, but it happens to fall into a domain where I bring a significant amount of expertise to the table, because I've worked in this general industry for quite a while. And then I will spare you also the technical details here. It's not really important for my story. But then I noticed that there was a claim in there being made, basically in rough terms, about an agreement that has been struck between Netflix and Comcast as a major telecommunication carrier in the US, that supposedly was kind of unprecedented in the history of the internet. And from my perspective, I thought, interesting, I don't think this is true. And I was somehow kind of, it felt a bit like a déjà vu, because I had these kind of experiences before where I read something in the news, and just in the daily newspaper or somewhere else, I hear something on TV or something, and as soon as they move into territories where I have some actual expertise or knowledge, I am always bewildered about the things they say. I'm like, it's always, I can see that there are restrictions, of course, on the medium, right? You have little space to explain complicated stuff and things like that. But it felt a bit like a déjà vu, because I had this in different fields. I noticed this already. I noticed this, of course, also already before in other news and when it comes to IT stuff. I also noticed this when I was working a while back in biomechanics in university. And then people were writing about research that was being done at the institute, and I noticed what kind of rubbish they were writing about this. And I noticed it just in the general domain of exercise physiology and stuff like that, because I had some professional background in this. And so it felt like this déjà vu, like, oh, I know this. Now I'm watching this presentation and claims are being made, and I think, well, I know that this is not true. Okay, so I wrote them an email about that. I said, hey, in this presentation, such and such, to use a Hoppe term, he likes to say this German, such and such. So I laid out my case, and then a while later I got an email back. And at the end of this email, they said, well, this presentation didn't really do too well, and so it wouldn't be really worth it changing anything there. And that was kind of it sounds strange from today's perspective, but it was kind of an aha moment for me, because I noticed that I had put so much trust and I projected so much integrity, like I had such high expectations there into them, and I noticed that there was actually an if in front of the I'm always going to correct my mistakes or something like that. You know? So it's not, and it's my point here is not I don't blame them for that. I'm more wondering why did I take this information like this in the first place? So then I started wondering, so if I wouldn't have known that, if I wouldn't have known about this particular field, I think I would have just taken this information, and from then on I would have thought, I know it is like that. And then I started thinking about all kinds of other information I got from the same source, and I noticed in a lot of cases, I think I did that. When I didn't have any kind of significant own expertise, I just took it and said, now I know it. And that's what I call, coming back to the title, a person in the box of truth. Because essentially, if I just do that, once I don't know any better, I just take it and say, now I know that it is that way. I've essentially put the source of the information into my box of truth. But of course, actually things what can be true, well, statements can be true and false, right? And there shouldn't be a person in this box. And I will come back to the box metaphor a bit later. So that was kind of a first aha moment for me. And I want to tell you a second example of a bit of a bit different nature. You might, for those of you who have listened or read more of his material, you might recall this number of children being spanked like 936 times per year. There was a study, and he cited this number in multiple occasions throughout multiple different contexts and stuff like that. And so this is heavy stuff, right? This is like, just imagine that, 936 times per year on average. This is crazy. And that was an important topic for me, and I decided at some point, okay, I have to, this sounds incredible to me. This is such a fantastic number, like fantastic is maybe a bad German metaphor, a German word, like I couldn't believe really this number, and so I decided, okay, I have to read the paper. So I got the paper, and I read the paper, and it turned out that this number was nowhere to find in the paper. But worse than that, the paper didn't contain any basis for making such extrapolation, such claim. And I said before that this is an example of a bit different nature, because I really do blame them for that. Not for the other thing, you know, these things happen. But I do really blame them for that, because I wrote them an email again, as I did before, and I said, okay, I think it's really misleading to use this number. I've heard you do this in a couple of times. I think it's really misleading for these and these reasons. I have read this paper. I wrote down the technical details. I got an email back, and the email said, you're absolutely right. We are aware of this. And I was like, what? And to me, this is absolutely unacceptable. To this day, when you go on YouTube, there's an interview with him, with the researcher who did this study. The title of this video is Study: Parents Spank Their Children 936 Times per Year. And then it goes on a bit. When you listen to this interview, he brings up this number. And so he talks about this extrapolated number. And this guy, this researcher, has the nerves to say it could very well be that high. And he has absolutely zero basis in this paper to make such a claim. And that's also kind of a déjà vu. I witnessed that back in university. When media rolls in there, you know, they will tell you anything. It's such a draw. They will tell you the most fantastic stories about their research. And yeah, so to me, this is, for example, this is an example that is absolutely unacceptable. This is, especially if in a topic like this, right? This is not just about something that is something light that nobody is interested in. That was a huge hammer he used, an emotional hammer, and it's just plain wrong. And he, at least to the point where I had a more dense overview over what he talked about, he never came back and said, I made a big mistake here. And so, yeah, that's really something I do blame them for. But again, the interesting thing is, why did it land with me as being true? I remember talking to other people. I remember talking to other people, telling them there has been this study, and the study showed that kids get hit 936 times per year. So it kind of, in me, I regarded it as being true. I talked about it as if I know. And I mean, this is not, you don't need the 936 times, right? Any number below that is worse enough. So yeah, so at this point, there was a second example where I just noticed that there was a problem with the way I was processing information. And as I said, also for me, he is just an example now. I'm sure, and I have some, when I think about it, there's some things come up where from other sources and other places where I did the same thing. And so the question is, of course, now I'm standing there and I'm saying, okay, this is not good. It doesn't feel good also. It doesn't feel good to just eat up this information and to digest it directly into my box of truth. And that's not what I want. It doesn't feel authentic. But what do I do instead? And so because my first thought was, well, clearly it's impossible, right? It's impossible to check every piece of information to the last detail yourself. How do you want to do that? Don't you have to trust somebody else to make the judgment call for you? And well, I want to make a suggestion of an approach where I think this is not necessary, and to introduce this, or to lead us on this way, I want to do a little experiment with you. And I think it would be good if all of you stand up and just step back behind the chairs, okay? Just go behind the chairs because we need to do some horizontal thing here. Yeah, okay, super. That's perfect. So we have the walls look exactly the same. It doesn't matter. Here, so this side to your right, this is the true side, okay? And this side here, the door is the false side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a series of statements, and you have to go to whichever side you think that this information should be located. Okay? So we will start with something to warm up, something very simple, to get the sides right.
Is it like a binary thing, or is there degrees? Can we go like halfway or something?
I would suggest for now we do it as a binary thing.
Okay.
Okay? So I will give you something very simple for the beginning. I am in Prague. Yes, everybody remembers the true side. That's very good. Okay, I just wanted to see that. Okay.
If I don't blow.
Well, currently I don't give you that choice. But I expected somebody asking this. So, to come back to a topic I just talked about, what about the statement, and you can fill in specific details you would need. I'm simplifying the statement. Spanking lowers a child's IQ. True is over there, false is over here. Sorry? The statement was, spanking lowers a child's IQ. See where you want to place yourself on this question. I feel that there's some lemming effect going on here.
I don't have enough evidence to say something.
Yeah, okay, then that can happen. Okay, I give you another one. Raising the minimum wage increases unemployment.
Yeah, come back.
Okay. So, okay, still undecided. Yeah. Okay, I want to make a little, what's that called? I want to add something to the statement. Raising the minimum wage increases unemployment, all other things being equal. No, they are slowly coming back. Oh. Okay. Okay, then I give you the last one. Maybe we will get a bit more diverse distribution. We'll see. Global mean temperature will rise by at least 3 degrees by the year 2100. 2100.
Can you repeat that?
I repeat, global mean temperature will rise by at least 3 degrees Celsius by 2100. Yeah, okay. Okay. Yeah, you're standing on the false side. Okay. Okay, I'm stopping here with my examples, but I want to ask you, and we already got this feedback, right, from a few people. How do you feel with about these two choices I'm giving you to put yourself on the true or the false side?
Seems not enough.
Seems not enough, okay?
I would need at least 2 more.
At least 2 more, okay?
I don't know and I don't care.
Oh. I haven't thought about the second one. Okay. So let's quickly, I will leave out the I am in Prague because I think most of you don't need the second category there. But let's repeat this and let's say true is here, as we just had, false is over there. And if you're not sure, you don't really need to distinguish degrees here, okay? Just I'm not sure, you just come in the middle. Okay? So let's do this again with the spanking lowers a child's IQ. Spanking lowers a child's IQ is the thesis.
Yeah.
Preponderance of evidence?
Okay? I see a lot of people in the middle. Good. Then we had the second one, and I will immediately use the one with a little extra at the end. Raising the minimum wage increases unemployment, all other things being equal. Okay. And lastly, what about the 3 degrees warming by 2100?
That's a relief now.
Okay, lots of people in the middle. Okay, come back, sit down. So it's really nice, right, to have this third category. I feel very restricted when I don't get these kind of choices. For example, when I have to fill out a questionnaire, I hate it. I hate it so much because you're supposed to make these check marks, but none of the answers is what I want to say. And it feels really bad for me. I avoid this as far as I can. Yeah. So I think the same, I will, this little experiment we did, with also in the end with the 3 categories, this leads into my suggestion or into what I experimented with in terms of dealing with knowledge acquisition, with processing information and judging it. Because the model I'm proposing is the following. I would propose to have this little box of truth that is already in my title, to have this close to you, well protected, somewhere up on a pedestal. And then I would propose that you have a second category, which is a big bucket somewhere down here on the floor, which is called I'm not sure, or I don't know, or you could make distinctions there, but for simplicity's sake, let's stick with the 2. And my default mode would be that if some information flows in, like from which source it might be, that its default route is to first go into this big bucket. It's like a sea of information which is labeled I'm not sure, or I don't know. At least I know that I heard this piece of information, but if it's true or not. And then you have this big bucket and you have your little box up here, right? And then it's just like in physics, to bring something from this bucket down here into the box up here, you have to do work. So you have to take something from down here, you have to do work to lift it up. And the work, of course, in this case, is the intellectual work to really think this through yourself and to really make it your own, to chew on it, and to the point that it doesn't matter anymore where it came from, really. That you have made it your own. And that way, of course, it's a relatively small amount of things that you can put into this box, right? We don't have endless time or energy to do that. And if I would take those, just to give you a few examples, if I would take those statements I just gave you, well then, for example, the first one, I'm reasonably sure I'm in the borders of Prague currently, of the city of Prague. I will put this, I know that this is true. When it comes to the child's IQ, to the effect of spanking on a child's IQ, this for me clearly lies in the big bucket where I have to say I'm not sure. And my goal is to reflect that also when I use this information in conversations, for example, to not claim that that is that way, but that I heard this piece of information. It's interesting. And I can always come back later, right, and put the work in and lift it up. And so, but this for me would be clearly down here. I just heard it. I've never really looked into it or put any significant amount of work into it. What else did we have? We had the thing with the unemployment and the minimum wage. Well, if there is this little appendix at the end, all other things being equal, then from my study of Austrian economics, I'm reasonably sure that this is logically correct. If you leave this off, I'm not sure at all. I would even ponder the possibility that this is unknowable.
What does this statement mean if it doesn't mean all other things equal?
Yeah, the thing, this is just a standard appendix that they do a lot, right? They say, well, if everything stays equal.
If you use the short version, isn't it understood that you mean all other things equal?
You can say it's understood for you. I'm not sure if it's generally understood because, well, I mean, the thing is you can only say something definitively if you isolate the one variable, right? And if you put in the whole human factor, for example, or all other effects that will flow from this one change, it gets hard to impossible to say anything what the result is and what the causality was. So that's how I would put it. And then, of course, the same with the temperature, right? I don't have a crystal ball. How should I know what's the temperature in 100 years? And so I'm trying to apply this and to put much more of the information I get, no matter where it comes from, into this bucket of I'm not so sure at first. And that's where I want to come back to this term of trust, because I have the feeling that trust, the concept of trust, is kind of misplaced in this area of knowledge acquisition. Because if you, in the end, if you put in something into this big bucket and you really work with it and you make it your own, you have basically cut off the connection to the source. It doesn't really matter anymore where it comes from. And so once you really make these things your own, you don't have the need for judging trust in this one source, this other source, who is more credible. I think in this model it doesn't make too much sense. But then, of course, I have two main questions that arise for me when I think about applying this kind of mindset. And the first one is, can I approach the world in this way? Or will I just starve because I cannot survive anymore, because if I only want to be sure of the things I've really thought through myself, does this have kind of limits like that I'm not able to live really anymore, or just very badly? It's the first question. And the second question is, why would I want to go into the world like that? And I want to give you my personal answer to both of them. So until today, I survived pretty well, but that's not the most important part. Of course, this is also it's not a 100% thing, right? I catch myself all the time doing this thing I outlined. And it could be, but I want to make a different proposal here. So I want to make a distinction that I think is important. And the distinction is, just because I don't take things for being true from other people, doesn't mean I cannot act using this information. It doesn't stop me from acting. Somebody might tell me, to fix your washing machine, you have to do X, Y, and Z. I can just do it and see if it works for me. And that's something very different. In the absence of better information, I can just try it. I can act on it without claiming I now know why my washing machine is broken and what I have to do to, there's a different thing if I claim this to be true, or if I just try it out. You could think of a little department in this box of truth, or maybe an extension of things that are currently in trial mode, so to say, right? So it doesn't stop you from taking information from the world and acting on it. And so I think, therefore, you are not starving because you cannot buy food anymore, because you don't know, etc., etc. So I think that is an important distinction, that you can act without claiming to definitely know things. And as to the second question, why would you want to do that? I have two answers here. The first one is that for me, it's another big departure from institutions like schools and universities. Because I think these institutions are, to a large degree, based on you claiming to know stuff without ever really having understood them. Because just the sheer volume, right, in school, the sheer volume of things you should know, how should you be able to really, you just say the things that somebody else told you, or that you have read in some book, but you never really got your own grip on it. And so this feels very good to me, to take a further step back from that, and it takes pressure off somehow, and to just accept that I know much less than people wanted me to claim to know back then. So that kind of feels like a relief. And the other thing is, coming back to this to what I said in the beginning, it feels to me that how I understand the world forms this framework for my experience in the world. And there, I prefer to have this framework a bit more flexible and maybe with bigger holes in this net, compared to filling these holes with knowledge, with truth that is not really my own, and maybe not even, and maybe if I examine it, it just breaks away under myself. So for me, it's a preferable state to keep this net a bit thinner, and to not get invested into these into the knowledge I've taken from other authorities that I have made to authorities, right? Because I think since for me there is this interaction between what I think I know, what I believe to be true about the world, and how I feel in the world, how I experience the world, I think there is this effect called emotional investment happening also. And once certain ideas get connected to certain feelings, and they might even be good, right? They might be positive. It gets more difficult to examine them again. So for me, it feels much more honest, much more authentic to stand on fewer poles there on this framework and to have bigger holes in between. And maybe that's also something you have experienced. For example, when you talk to other people and you discuss about a certain subject or something, and then you bring an argument forward that is actually not yours, like it's not, you haven't really thought this through. I did this a lot also, and it never felt good. It felt like suddenly I'm standing on very thin ice, and of course I know that I'm standing on thin ice, and I'm getting more anxious and more like defensive, and so that's something that is, for me, feels much more authentic and much more honest, much more relaxed, to just put many, many, many things into this bucket, I'm not sure, or I don't know, and only rely on a few things where I think I really have put in the work. So this would be my suggestion to, and you could try this out, also in small bits and pieces, how this is for you. If you just hear things, even from people who you trust a lot, but don't take it for true, but just store it somewhere. Don't trust, just store. That's my mantra here. Just store it in your information archive as an interesting tidbit you picked up somewhere. For me, it's a good step, I think, and that's also pretty much the end of what I have to say. And I'm not sure about the time. I'm not sure what you want to do in terms of format of discussion.
Thanks for your speech.
You're welcome.
We will now separate into groups again. So I encourage you to, again, spontaneously separate into groups of 5 people. And you will have a time, let's say 20 minutes, to discuss what you heard, to throw ideas at each other, and I want you to be active in the debate. I don't want you to just sit here and consume the presentations. I want you to be active. So let's start the brain juices